Hi, I'm Bru Baker, and I'm here on Love Bites today to read to you from my latest release. It is tall, dark, and deported. It is number 31 in the Dreamspinner Desire series, so you know that it is full of tropes and fluff and all of those awesome things, with, of course, a very happy, fluffy ending. If you've been following along on my blog tour, then you know that today we are going to be reading a scene that involves Auntie Anne's pretzels, which it's a fairly important scene for them because it is the first time that the two of them actually speak. Mattias has been kind of scoping out Crawford from across the way as their flights have been delayed and they've been stuck in the airport. But this is going to be the first time that they actually meet, introduce themselves, and talk to each other. So Mattias is grabbing some lunch. You know, pickings are usually pretty slim in an airport, so he's not very excited about it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in with that. He dug a spoon out of his bag and forced himself to take a bite. It wasn't terrible, but the granola was soggy from sitting on top of the yogurt. He stirred it in and decided just to bolt the entire thing down. It would take his stomach a few minutes to register that he wasn't still hungry, but at this point it was more about getting it down than actually enjoying the food. As he was swallowing a particularly big bite, he saw the handsome businessman walk by. He'd pegged him as a health nut from his rangy muscles and his overall clean-cut aura, but the man had a bag from McDonald's in one hand and a bag of Auntie Anne's pretzels in the other, so he clearly misjudged this one. Mattias knew he shouldn't say anything, but he was too intrigued not to. Looking for a spot to sit? Not a lot of competition for these old phones, so you're welcome to join me here. The man looked startled, but after a slight hesitation he walked over and sat a seat away. You're headed to Vancouver too, aren't you? I thought I saw you at the gate. Mattias tried not to preen at that. The gate had been packed, so it had to mean something that the man had picked him out of the crowd. I don't think there's a very good chance the plane will be there when we get over to Terminal 2, he confided. No, definitely not. There's a mechanical problem, and they said they were flying in apart from somewhere else. That's why we're changing gates. It's closer to where the other plane is coming in. I tried to get onto another flight to Vancouver, but they were all overbooked. So that's what the man had been so upset about with the gate clerk. It made Mattias oddly happy to know that the fellow hadn't been arguing over belonging in first class or something. He'd hate for someone so attractive to be an asshole. No luck? The man shook his head. I'm fifth on standby for the last flight out tonight, but everything between now and then is overbooked, so there's no chance. Mattias nodded sympathetically. Is Vancouver home? He was probably trying to get back to a wife and kids. Mattias risked a quick look at the man's ring finger, but it was bare. Not that that meant anything. Many men didn't wear rings. Even Duarte didn't a lot of the time, though for more practical reasons. With all the labor out in the orchards, a ring could be a liability. A hired hand on the olive farm had lost a finger when his ring had gotten caught in a harvesting machine, and it had left a lasting impression on Duarte and Mattias both. The man grimaced and shook his head. No, I'm heading there for work. Mattias grinned. Not many people would be in such a hurry to get to work. The man barked out a laugh. I'm not so much in a hurry to start the work as I am in a hurry to finish it, he said. He put his bags down on the seat between them and held out his hand. I'm being terribly rude. I'm Crawford. After wiping his hands on his pants in case there was any yogurt on them, Mattias took Crawford's hand. Crawford's grip was firm and his skin was soft and warm. Mattias knew his own calloused hands must feel rough and hard to Crawford, but Crawford didn't recoil. If anything, he left their hands intertwined just a beat too long, which was interesting. Mattias. Nice to meet you, Mattias. I wish it was under better circumstances. Though this is hardly bad for the airport, is it? I mean, my first flight got out on time, which could have been an omen of worse to come. Mattias laughed. This is my only leg, so we'll blame the delay on you then. The skin at the corners of Crawford's eyes crinkled when he smiled, and Mattias liked it more than he wanted to admit. So where are you from? If not, it's not here, he asked, afraid that if he didn't keep the conversation moving, Crawford would pick up his lunch and move on. Los Angeles, Crawford said. His McDonald's bag rustled when he opened it, and Mattias was surprised to see him pull out a yogurt that didn't look that different from his own, instead of a greasy burger that he'd been expecting. Crawford seemed to notice Mattias's neglected yogurt at that moment, and he toasted him with his own container. Gotta take what you can get when it comes to airport food, he said ruefully before taking the lid off and stirring the congealed fruit into the yogurt. Mattias picked up his own spoon and mirrored the motion. It wasn't going to taste any better warm, so he may as well finish it. Not a fan. I hate eating fast food, Mattias admitted. Crawford nodded and swallowed his bite. Me too. I'm not much of a cook, but I don't like any of this, he said, gesturing toward the fast food restaurants lining the concourse. Though hot pretzels are my kryptonite. I rarely have them, but since today is going from bad to worse, I decided to treat myself. He looked both ashamed and defiant, and it was endearing. It made Crawford look 10 years younger. Not that Mattias knew how old he was, but he was guessing 40-something. The silvering at Crawford's temples and the laugh lines were a clear giveaway, though he was fit and healthy-looking. I've never had them, so I won't judge you, Mattias said. He looked at Crawford out of the corner of his eye, not sure if they were flirting or not. It felt like they were. Were they? Or was Crawford just happy to find someone to talk to in a boring airport during a long layover? What? Seriously? You've never had a hot pretzel? Crawford's eyes widened incredulously. Where are you from? Mars? Mattias snickered. Portugal. We don't have... He squinted at the bag. Grease spots were starting to soak through, and he had to fight not to grimace. Antianes. Oh, this is just one type. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's the best type. I think they dip them in butter after they cook them or something. But you can get hot pretzels everywhere. Sporting events, skating rinks, library food courts. You've really never had one? Crawford reached into the white bag and pulled out a small doughy nugget that was covered in large pellets of salt. It didn't look like any pretzel Mattias had ever seen, though he'd never seen any that weren't small and hard, so who knew? Shouldn't it be folded? Crawford's brows drew together for a moment, and then his expression cleared. Oh, these are pretzel bites. But yeah, they sell the big pretzels too. These are just cut up so they're easier to eat. Less messy. The whole thing glistened with butter, so Mattias very much doubted it was actually less messy than its larger cousin. His gaze traveled up to Crawford's mouth, drawn to the full, rosy lips. There was a tiny bit of yogurt in the corner of his mouth, and the resulting mental image made Mattias shift slightly in his seat. Bru was right. He needed to settle down and stop fantasizing about handsome strangers in airports. Well, the last bit was his own addition, but it still stood. You should try it, Crawford said. He held the pretzel out to Mattias. Mattias shook his head. They're your favorite. You keep it. Crawford held his gaze for a second and then shrugged. He popped the pretzel in his mouth, his eyes fluttering shut for a moment as he chewed. He had long lashes, Mattias noticed, and he made eating a pretzel look orgasmic. They had to be flirting. There was no way this wasn't flirting. Your loss, Crawford said when he'd swallowed and opened his eyes again. But they're about 100 times better than they look, I promise. Are you sure you don't want to try one? Mattias's attention was now fixed on Crawford's lower lip, which was glossy with butter from his pretzel. He swallowed hard. A small one, he said, his voice huskier than it had been only a moment ago. Crawford grinned. He took out another pretzel from the bag, but instead of holding it out to Mattias, he let it hover between them, his expression questioning. A beat later, Mattias leaned forward and opened his mouth, praying he wasn't reading this wrong. Crawford's smile grew, and he gently placed the pretzel into Mattias's mouth. The taste of salt exploded across Mattias's tongue, followed by butter and the sweet, yeasty flavor of the dough. He'd been skeptical, but Crawford was right. The pretzel was delicious. Or maybe it was just that all of Mattias's senses felt heightened as he sat there, eating out of a total stranger's hand. So that, again, is from Tall, Dark, and Deported. It was out on April 1st from Dreamspinner Press. It's number 31 in the Dreamspun Desires series. And if that piqued your interest for Auntie Anne's pretzels and you don't have one that's near you, I did do a copycat recipe, which I shared on the Novel Approach pretty recently. And you can find links to that on my blog and on my website. So thanks for listening, and I will be back in a few days on Boy Meets Boy to read another scene from Tall, Dark, and Deported.